He walked into his own office and froze. A young girl, maybe 10 years old, was sitting in his chair. His chair. Behind his desk. Her small fingers moved across his keyboard like she owned the place. She didn't flinch when the door opened. She didn't even look up. And the billionaire Marcus Hale, one of the most powerful men in Silicon Valley, stood in his own doorway with his hands pressed to his head, unable to speak. If stories like this one move you, you're in the right place. Welcome to Soul Light Stories, where we share real moments of human kindness that remind us what truly matters. If you haven't already, hit subscribe and stay with us. Drop a comment below and tell us what you think as we go. Now let's get into this story, because what happens next is something you won't forget. Marcus Hale had not always been the kind of man who had a private office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the San Francisco skyline. He had not always owned a company worth $3 billion. He had not always worn tailored suits or been driven to work in a black car with tinted windows. There was a time, not so long ago by his own account, when he ate cold soup from a can and slept on a friend's couch in a studio apartment in Oakland, writing code at 2 in the morning while the rest of the world dreamed. He remembered those days more than people expected him to. He kept a single photo of that apartment on his phone, blurry and poorly lit, just to remind himself where he came from. By the Tuesday morning that changed everything, Marcus was 43 years old and running a technology company called Hale Systems, a firm that built enterprise software for hospitals across the country. The work was important. He knew that. The software his team created helped doctors access patient records faster, reduced errors in medication management, and had, according to a study he kept framed in his lobby, saved over 400 lives in its first 3 years of deployment. He was proud of that more than the money. At least, that's what he told himself. His office occupied the entire top corner of the building on the 14th floor. It had a bookshelf built into the far wall, a leather executive chair he'd bought from an auction, supposedly once owned by a senator, and a single massive monitor that displayed code and dashboards and reports depending on the hour of the day. His assistant, a sharp and organized woman named Deborah, kept the schedule tight. Nobody got into that office without going through her. Nobody. That particular Tuesday, Marcus had flown back from a 3-day trip to Chicago where he'd been closing a major hospital contract. His flight landed early, ahead of schedule, and rather than wait for his driver he'd taken a cab straight to the office. He texted Deborah from the lobby but she didn't respond, which was unusual. He assumed she was in a meeting. He took the elevator up alone, stepped into the 14th floor, and walked down the quiet hallway toward his office. The door was slightly ajar. He could hear a faint sound. Typing. He pushed the door open. And there she was. A girl. Young, maybe 9 or 10, wearing a denim jacket with the sleeves slightly too long, her natural hair pulled up into a loose bun at the top of her head. She was sitting perfectly straight in his enormous leather chair, her feet not quite reaching the floor, her eyes fixed on the monitor in front of her with an expression of deep and total concentration. Her small hands moved across the keyboard with a speed and confidence that made Marcus blink twice, because for a moment he thought he was seeing things. He stood in the doorway. His briefcase was in one hand. His coffee cup was in the other. Neither moved. He watched her. She didn't look up. She kept typing. Finally he said, quietly, "Who gave you permission to be in here?" She looked up then. Her eyes were large and calm and completely unafraid. She looked at him the way you might look at someone who had interrupted you mid-thought and said, with remarkable composure, "I'm fixing something." Marcus stepped fully into the room. He set his briefcase down. He set his coffee on the edge of the desk and said, "You're fixing something." "Yes," she said. "Your scheduling system. It has a memory leak. It's been causing the application to crash every 72 hours. I found the loop." Marcus stared at her. Then he looked at the screen. Then he looked at her again. "How old are you?" he asked. 10, she said. "Well, 10 and a half. He pulled up a chair from beside the bookshelf and sat down directly across the desk from her, which meant he was now sitting on the visitor side of his own desk, and this struck him as both absurd and somehow completely appropriate given what was happening. He said, "What's your name?" "Amara," she said. "Amara Ellis." "Amara," he repeated. "How did you get into this building?" She paused her typing. She folded her hands in her lap and looked at him with the patience of someone who had prepared for this question. "My mom works in the building," she said. She's a cleaning supervisor. She comes in early on Tuesdays. I come with her sometimes when school is delayed. Today school was delayed 2 hours because of the water main. She lets me sit in the break room on the 6th floor, but today I went exploring. Marcus leaned back. You went exploring? Yes. The door to your office wasn't fully closed. I saw the monitor was on. I was going to just look, but then I saw the error log open on the screen and I could see the problem, so I sat down. She paused. I probably should have asked someone first. Probably, Marcus said. But his voice had already shifted from the clipped, slightly stunned tone of a man who had just discovered an intruder into something quieter and more curious. Because the error log she was describing, the memory leak she claimed to have found, was something his own engineering team had been chasing for 6 weeks. 6 weeks. They'd had 3 separate debugging sessions. They'd brought in an outside consultant. They had not found it. He stood up and walked around to look at the screen. She scooted the chair slightly to give him a better view but didn't vacate it, which he noticed and didn't correct. He looked at the code on the screen. He saw exactly what she had highlighted. And he saw, with the immediate clarity of someone who had once written code like this himself, that she was right. It was right there. A looping reference inside an asynchronous callback that accumulated memory every time a new scheduling request came in. It was elegant in its hiddenness and obvious once you saw it. She had seen it. He straightened up. How do you know about memory leaks? He asked. I learned online, she said. I've been learning JavaScript for about 2 years. And Python. And some C. My uncle has a laptop he lets me use. He taught me the basics and then I just kept going. 2 years, Marcus said. So since you were 8. 8.5, she said, with the same precision she'd used about her own age, and Marcus almost smiled. He asked her a few more questions then. Not to test her, exactly, though he was absolutely testing her. He asked her why a memory leak was specifically dangerous in a scheduling application. She explained it clearly, in her own words, not recited terminology. He asked her what she would do differently in the architecture to prevent it from recurring. She thought for a moment, chewing the inside of her cheek, and then gave him an answer that was incomplete but not wrong, the kind of answer a junior developer might give, someone who had good instincts but not yet the full vocabulary. He asked her what her favorite thing about coding was. She didn't hesitate. She said, it's the only place where if you understand the rules, you can build anything. It doesn't matter who you are. Marcus was quiet for a moment after she said that. Then he asked her if she wanted a glass of water. She said yes. He went and got her one from the small refrigerator in the corner of the office, and when he came back she had returned her attention to the screen and was making a careful, precise correction to the line of code she'd identified. He watched her. He didn't interrupt. When Deborah finally appeared in the doorway 15 minutes later, her face was a picture of controlled panic. She started to say something and Marcus held up one hand to stop her. He pointed at Amara. He said, quietly, she found the scheduling bug. Deborah blinked. The one from 6 weeks, Marcus said. Yes. Deborah looked at Amara. Amara looked at Deborah and said, politely, hi. Deborah said hi back, in the slightly dazed voice of someone whose morning has gone somewhere entirely unexpected. Marcus asked Deborah to find out which floor Amara's mother was working on and to let her know her daughter was safe and with him. Then he asked Deborah to bring in 2 chairs and, if possible, some breakfast, because he suspected this conversation was going to take a while and he hadn't eaten since the airport. What followed was one of the most unusual mornings Marcus could remember in years. He and Amara sat across from each other at his conference table. She had finally relinquished his chair, and they talked. He asked her about her school, which was a public middle school across the bay in Oakland where she was in the 5th grade. He asked her about her classes. She said math and science were easy, that she liked history because stories were interesting, and that she found most of her school subjects too slow. Not in an arrogant way. She said it the way someone might say a road they walk every day is too familiar, not with contempt, just with a kind of quiet restlessness. She told him she wanted to be a software engineer. She said it plainly, without the nervous qualification that adults often put around their own ambitions. She didn't say she hoped to be one someday or that she was thinking about maybe looking into it. She said, I'm going to be a software engineer. And then she added, a good one. He asked her what was stopping her. She thought about that question honestly, the way children do before they learn to give comfortable answers, and she said, "We don't have a lot of money. My mom works really hard, but the good schools cost a lot and the programs for coding cost a lot. My uncle's laptop is old and it crashes sometimes." She looked at her hands. "I've been trying to find free resources, but some of the best ones you have to pay for eventually." Marcus nodded slowly. He asked her if her mother knew how talented she was. Amara smiled for the first time, a real smile, and said, "She thinks I'm going to hurt my eyes staring at screens too much." And then she laughed, a bright and entirely childlike laugh, and for just a moment the composed, serious little professional sitting across from him was simply a 10-year-old girl laughing about her mom, and Marcus felt something open up in the center of his chest that he didn't have a name for right away. Amara's mother, whose name was Gloria, arrived on the 14th floor about 20 minutes later. She came through the door with the taut expression of a woman who has been told her child is safe but whose body has not yet accepted that information. She looked at Amara first, confirmed with her own eyes that her daughter was whole and fine and sitting at a conference table eating a muffin, and then she looked at Marcus Hale with the kind of look that a mother gives a stranger when she is about to apologize and also, possibly, demand answers simultaneously. She said, "Mr. Hale, I am so sorry. I don't know how she got up here. She's supposed to stay on the 6th floor and Marcus said, "Your daughter found a software bug that my engineering team has been trying to locate for 6 weeks." Gloria stopped. She looked at Amara. Amara looked at the muffin. "She's been teaching herself to code for 2 years, Marcus said. "Did you know that?" Gloria said, slowly, "I knew she was on the laptop a lot. Her uncle said she was learning things." "I didn't really." She stopped again. She looked at her daughter with an expression that was shifting, visibly, from worry to something else. Something like wonder. Marcus asked if he could speak with both of them together. He asked Gloria to sit down. He offered her coffee, which she accepted with slightly trembling hands. And then he told them what he wanted to do. He had a foundation. Most people didn't know about it because he'd kept it deliberately quiet, a private charitable trust that funded STEM education programs for underserved students in the Bay Area. It was one of the things he'd started in the 3rd year of the company when the money started to feel like more than he needed and the memory of that Oakland apartment started to feel like an obligation rather than just a memory. The foundation had helped about 60 kids over its lifetime with scholarships, laptops, mentorship programs, and access to coding camps. He wanted Amara to be the 61st. He told Gloria he wanted to cover Amara's enrollment in one of the best STEM-focused private middle schools in the city, starting in the fall. He wanted to get Amara a new laptop, a proper development machine, not the kind you buy as a first computer but the kind you buy when you know what you're doing. He wanted to connect her with his head of engineering, a woman named Patricia who had herself grown up in Compton and written her first program on a library computer, who had been looking for a young mentee for over a year. And he said that if Amara still wanted to, she could come back to his office, with proper permission this time, to see how the professional version of what she was already doing actually worked in the real world. Gloria was very still during all of this. When he finished, she pressed her lips together and said, in a careful and dignified voice, "Why are you doing this?" Marcus considered the question honestly. He said, "Because I was her, once. Not exactly her. But close enough. Someone took a chance on me when I was young and had no business being in the room I was in. I wouldn't be here without that. And she shouldn't have to wait for permission to be in the rooms she belongs in." Gloria pressed her hand to her mouth. She turned toward the window. She was quiet for a long moment and then she said, in a voice that was thick but steady, "She works so hard. You have no idea how hard that child works." "I think I do," Marcus said. "She found in 40 minutes what 6 engineers couldn't find in 6 weeks." Amara, who had been listening to all of this from behind her muffin with the focused stillness of a child who knows the adults are deciding something important, said quietly, "I also want to fix the rest of it. The bug fix I did today is right, but the underlying architecture could be restructured to be more efficient. I have some ideas." There was a brief silence in the room. And then Marcus laughed. A full, genuine, surprised laugh. And then Gloria laughed too, through the tears she'd been trying to hold back, and the sound of it filled that big quiet office on the 14th floor like something that had been missing from it for a long time. The months that followed were not a fairy tale, not in the smooth and frictionless way of stories that have no texture. The new school was a transition, and transitions are hard. Amara was brilliant, but she was also a kid who'd grown up in Oakland, moving into spaces where almost no one looked like her, and there were moments that were difficult and lonely and complicated in ways that a new laptop and a scholarship couldn't fix. Gloria worked extra shifts for months before she would accept help with the after-school transportation costs, because she was a woman who had always provided for her daughter and needed to keep providing, even as things changed. And Marcus, for his part, had to learn that mentorship is not a transaction, that you can't write a check and consider yourself finished, that showing up matters more than the gesture. He showed up. He visited the school 3 times that first year. He attended a science fair where Amara's project, a self-correcting algorithm that identified medication dosage errors and simulated patient data, won first place and left 2 of the judges visibly struggling to ask questions that matched her level of knowledge. He sat with her at Patricia's desk on a Saturday afternoon for 4 hours while Amara and his head of engineering went deep into a problem together, and he watched Patricia's face as she realized, in real time, that the kid across from her was not just talented but exceptional in the way that only comes from a combination of natural ability and years of quiet, private, relentless practice. On the anniversary of the day Amara had sat down in his chair, Marcus came into the office to find a small card on his desk, placed precisely in the center, written in careful handwriting. It said, "The architectural changes I proposed are ready for review. I tested them in the sandbox environment and performance is up 31%. Let me know if you want to walk through the code." And at the bottom, in smaller writing, "Also thank you for everything." He kept that card. He put it next to the blurry photo of the Oakland apartment on his phone. When people asked him what he was most proud of in his career, he still talked about the 400 lives saved by his hospital software. But he had started to add something after that. He had started to say that the thing he believed in most, the thing that felt most true after all the years and all the money and all the success, was that talent is everywhere. It is in every city, in every neighborhood, in every kid who finds their way to a screen at 8 years old and starts learning because something in them recognizes a language that finally makes sense. The only thing talent is not, always, is seen. Sometimes all it takes is a door left slightly open. And someone willing to walk in. We often think that kindness has to be a grand thing. A big announcement. A dramatic moment. But sometimes it's just the decision to stay in the room. To ask the next question instead of calling security. To listen when someone smaller than you tells you something true. Marcus Hale could have walked Amara back to the 6th floor that morning. He could have made a polite apology to Gloria and gone about his Tuesday. The world would not have noticed. But he stayed. And that small choice to stay, to be curious, to see, changed the direction of a child's life. The beautiful truth is that most of us have more power to do that than we know. Not necessarily with scholarships or foundations. But with attention. With the willingness to stop and actually look at who is in front of us. To ask their name. To take seriously what they say they love and what they say they want. If you have ever felt unseen, you know exactly what it means to finally be noticed. And if you have ever been the one who noticed someone, really noticed them, you know that quiet and lasting feeling of having done something that genuinely mattered. If this story moved you today, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment below and tell us about a moment when someone believed in you, or when you chose to believe in someone else. Those stories matter. They always will. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Soul Light Stories, because there are more of these moments waiting, and every one of them is worth your time. The door was left slightly open. Someone walked in. And nothing was ever quite the same.